Every once in a while, an article comes out saying golden visas are for crooks or citizenship by investment is a scam. These articles generally stem from the fact that the journalists writing them actually don't know what they're talking about. There are actual inaccuracies in the article. But today, I'm going to share with you one of these articles and give you a Nomad response. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the author of this best-selling book on Amazon and the founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. Let's talk about golden visas. Let's talk about residence by investment and citizenship by investment. I've got an article from no less than Foreign Policy to share with you called Oligarchs' Favorite U.S. Visa Might Not Last. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I often see misconceptions from everyone from CNBC to The Guardian about what exactly is a golden visa, which is a form of residence by investment. There are plenty of those programs around the world. Citizenship by investment. These programs allow people to invest money, whether it's a donation in a Caribbean country for quick citizenship, whether it's a residence program where you're buying government bonds or you're hiring a certain number of people or you're buying real estate that grants you residence. These are programs that help often smaller countries raise money, be competitive, and compete against larger powers. In exchange, they say, hey, you want to invest €500,000 in our country? Come on in. These countries have some of the strictest due diligence, much stricter than simply someone moving to the country to get a job, someone naturalizing. Certainly the U.S., which is mentioned here, has pretty strict due diligence for someone wanting a bloody tourist visa. But a lot of these countries that have, in Europe, for example, more traditional paths where someone gets a job, someone gets married, people come in, they're not doing the kind of scrutiny that a country like Malta is doing when it's granting someone an exceptional, what they call exceptional citizenship, or what the Caribbean is doing when they're offering citizenship by investment. There is some pretty stringent due diligence, which these hit pieces overlook. And so, the article says, this is Foreign Policy, calls are growing louder to fix the quote-unquote golden visa program that has flooded the United States with dubious foreign money. Now, first things first, the term golden visa started in Portugal and then I guess Spain back a number of years ago when they basically said, hey, you bring the gold, we'll give you the quote-unquote visa, really a residence permit, and that's why it's called, at its core, residence by investment. You make an investment, you get residence, as opposed to citizenship by investment, where you make an investment, you make a donation, you very quickly get citizenship. A residence permit just means you have the right to live in the country. The U.S. does not have, per se, a golden visa program. I really don't see anyone calling it that. They do have what's called the EB-5 program, where you make an investment, and it's been in the news recently because they had raised the amount from $500,000 to $900,000, and then the court said, no, you got to bring it back. One thing that I've seen actually over the years is people like CNBC like laughing at how low the investment was, $500,000, and said that's so low. And then they compared it at one time to Malta, which at one point had a €650,000 donation to become a citizen in the course of a little over a year. There is a substantial difference between Malta, where $650, now $750 for the same timeline, plus a bunch of fees, in donations gets you citizenship in, by the way, a European Union country, in a Schengen area country, where you have the ability to now move to Ireland. At the time they said that, move to the UK, move to Switzerland, move to Germany, move to Spain. You have that privilege, right? You have the top quality passport, not just that the US has, but you have all the rights of living all over Europe. But you're making a donation, whereas in the US you're making theoretically an investment, and you're getting the right to move to the U.S., get a green card, and eventually become a citizen if you speak English and do other things. Of course that's going to cost less than, hey, we don't care. I mean, certainly Malta has very stringent due diligence, but it's not the same thing of, we want you to move here and love our country. It's a very different program, and that's what they get confused. So to start, I wouldn't call the U.S. a golden visa program. As to the claims that the U.S. is being flooded with quote-unquote dubious foreign money, that's been a complaint for a long time. What's interesting is if you're living in the United States and paying a lot of money in taxes, there are plenty of people who for years have been using the U.S. as a tax haven. They don't have your citizenship, but they're using the U.S. system. And there's been some action to kind of stem that or impose some reporting requirements, but Foreign Policy says the U.S. visa may not last. Now, here's the article. Thanks in large part to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, golden visas and golden passports, another term the media made up. Visas and passports granted to wealthy foreign nationals in return for significant investments, regardless of the sources of their wealth, not true, have exploded in popularity over the past year. The market is thriving thanks to a record number of applications, significant spikes in inquiries, and increasingly affordable pricing, as well as YouTube channels like Nomad Capitalist driving great demand. I added that last part. It says jurisdictions such as Latvia now sell these kinds of golden visas for as little as 60,000 euros, just over $70,000, which, if you're a real nomad capitalist, I would probably not be taking that cheapest Latvia residence program. Latvia, not a bad program at all, one that's not talked about enough, but probably one that's worth going with one of the larger investments to do. So regardless of the sources of their wealth is the first problem, because, again, the U.S., I don't deal very much in the U.S. EB-5 program. I'm helping people get out of the U.S. We think we've had one or two people where it made sense for them to become a U.S. citizen, and we helped them do that, and we had U.S. immigration attorneys. But generally speaking, I'm talking to people who are leaving the U.S. or who have never been in the U.S. and want to make sure they don't get sucked into the U.S. So I don't know exactly the EB-5, but if I do know what it's like to, the tourist visa process, other visa processes. The U.S., I mean, this is an information-driven machine. They know everyone who's coming and going. And so the idea that they are just letting people flood in. Now, the wealth, that's been a claim that's been commonly made. But let's go to other countries in Europe. Let's go to the Caribbean countries, the so-called golden passports, which is not really a term. These countries are doing very strict due diligence. Again, much more strict than they would do on anyone else. The Caribbean countries, Vanuatu, some of the smaller countries, partially do that because they don't want to end up on anyone's naughty list because they let someone in. In fact, you'll literally have some of these Caribbean countries where a guy got citizenship and then years after he got the citizenship committed some crime and it becomes a big incident and everyone calls for the end of the program because a guy became a citizen and then later became a criminal. A guy. So this idea that there's no oversight is ridiculous. The article from Foreign Policy continues, accompanying the popularity has been the growing awareness on how these kinds of programs open doors to dirty money and illicit finance. Generally, in my opinion, not true. Maybe I'm not spending enough time in parts of the world, but among nomad capitalists, not true. Last summer's so-called Russia report in the UK specifically singled out London's, another legacy brand, high-tax country, willingness to sell visas and residence to Russian oligarchs, overlooking their links with the Kremlin. I wonder in the sensationalist media how many Russians actually had links with the Kremlin and how many people at magazines like Foreign Policy just think if you're Russian, you must be like Putin's best friend. I'm guessing that the connection is not as strong as they'd like to think it is. Russians, unfortunately, have a pretty bad reputation. Perhaps some of them earned it, but some of them are just trying to get out because they're sick of the people who have earned it. And so, listen, here's my thought on all these countries like the U.S. and the U.K. When people say, Andrew, I don't want to leave the U.S. because there's nowhere better to go. The U.K. and Australia, they're no better. Yeah, you have to pick a different kind of country. And what is it so interesting that the places we tell you to go are often going to do a little bit more due diligence on you than the places that claim that they're so white glove and we have to shut down the Caribbean citizenship program and all the foo-foo European Parliament. Oh, how can Malta be in the citizenship business? No one should be allowed to do this. How dare someone be a citizen with only spending 2 weeks in the country? It's not Malta who's letting in the crooks. It's the countries that are the ones going and shoving their values down everyone's throat. Investigators, this is the article continuing, in Malta discovered that the notorious offshore haven, notorious, what they call the U.S. notorious, offshore haven continued to shop European Union citizenship. Yes, they have a program. To a raft of wealthy Chinese and Saudi nationals. Again, you're supposed to think because they're Chinese or Saudi that there's something nefarious going on. Despite ongoing investigations into the program from Brussels. Sure, an investigation from a bunch of uptight bureaucrats who are offended by the idea that any country needs money, any country needs investment, and that anyone should get anything in return. A bunch of bureaucrats who are tired of the fact, who hate the fact, they so hate the fact that in the year 2021, that in the 21st century, there are lots of countries that are open for business. There are lots of countries that in their lifetime were nothing burgers on the map, and now they have to compete with these people. The fact that all these European Union bureaucrats who claim to be, so virtuous, actually hate the fact that anyone who doesn't look or act like them gets to be competitive in the global marketplace. I think it's fantastic that the Turkeys and the Malaysias and the Colombias and the Panamas now get to compete for business in a way they didn't compete in these bureaucrats' lifetime. And they so hate that. And they then investigate anything where, oh, a Chinese guy became a citizen? Terrible. Yet Chinese make up the vast majority of many of these Caribbean citizenship by investment programs because there's so many, all really substantially all of the growth in ultra high net worth individuals, for example, in the world right now is coming out of Asia and coming out of China in particular. These people want options. They have a mediocre passport. The Saudis, I mean, great place to be, but want to have access to other parts of the world. I'm sure you could find some nefarious or notorious Americans. And so, therefore, Brussels opens an investigation. The article continues, and in Cyprus, citizens gathered to publicly protest the island's willingness to sell citizenship to money launderers, transnational criminals, and oligarchs linked to post-Soviet dictators, a program at the center of the so-called Cyprus Papers, which pulled back the curtain on wealthy crooks and criminals racing to the country into the... the language is so breathless for all of this. Bulgaria, for example, was going through past citizenship applications, and they found, I don't remember the exact number, I think at one point there were 12, at one point there were 6, maybe they had a couple dozen people in total, and of everybody who became a Bulgarian citizen, and of everyone who went through one of these citizenship by investment programs, they always come up with one guy or a couple guys. There was an article in The Guardian recently that came up with a couple people. By the way, half the people that were on their list were it's like, well, it was legal, but it shouldn't be. It's like, listen, you guys make the laws, and then you complain. But amid all this scrutiny, one of the leading jurisdictions involved in selling residence and eventual citizenship has largely escaped notice, the United States. For decades, Washington has feasted on funds gained via its own golden visa program. Technically, and correctly, known as the EB-5 investment visa program, the scheme traces back to 1990, when for a brief moment the United States thought, maybe we should be competitive too. For $500,000 and the pledge to create a handful of new jobs in the U.S., foreign nationals can gain conditional residence, followed shortly thereafter by a path to American citizenship. 30 years later, the program remains largely the same, and recent efforts to raise the cost were struck down as they raised it to $900,000. And so the article continues, but there are a couple of takeaways from this. Number one, to me, what stands out, and what we've been saying for some time, is that these countries are all more similar than you want to believe. Now, I don't live in this world. I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. We deal with clean people, beautiful people, loving people. But, these things, in my opinion, are such outliers, and the media loves to pick up on this. Why? Because the media hates the fact, and the governments hate the fact, that if you have accomplished some success, you have options. If you live in the United States, if you live in Canada, Australia, if you live in some country that's been treating you badly, if you are paying through the nose in taxes, they don't like the idea that you can potentially give up your citizenship or get another citizenship and have the option, have flexibility, have freedom, that you can have more options because, hey, everyone doesn't have the options. And in the increasingly egalitarian and equity-minded West, where everyone has to have the same, the fact that you worked hard or took risks or created a great business is meaningless to the fact that you should be able to go and help out a country and do things that their lawmakers would like to incentivize you to do and get some kind of benefit in return. But really, the U.S. is no better than these countries. I'm not here to bash the U.S. just for the sake of doing it, but if you're sitting in the U.S. and thinking, I don't want to go to one of these banana republics, your country is letting people in really potentially more so than a Caribbean citizenship that you can use to then move to Europe as an Antiguan or as a St. Lucia citizen or what have you. You can go and obtain citizenship in the EU, as much as the bureaucrats in Brussels don't like it because they feel they're losing control, because they feel it's not fair. That's what this is all about. Is the culture of the Western world is people are so desperate now to find something wrong. Of course there are some bad actors in these programs. There's bad actors in any kind of program. If you have someone from your family tree and you can go and claim citizenship by descent, the rules are a lot less strict. Where's everyone cracking down on that? But they're not, because it seems more legitimate. The idea that you bleed Italian and therefore you can be Italian, even though it was your great-grandfather. More so than you come and you invest in Italy's golden visa program. No, no, no. Then it becomes sacrosanct. Here's what I think you should do. And I've said this before. I've been interviewed by newspapers in some of these countries. I think the last one was in St. Lucia. And they said, what do you respond to people who have this high-minded attitude? I said, I don't. Now, apparently today I have given in. But, my approach is, you've seen Cyprus, the Cyprus Citizenship Program go away. You will, perhaps for different reasons, this year see Montenegro's Citizenship Program sunset. You have seen other programs come and go in terms of residence. Requirements have gotten more expensive. They've become more involved. To me, the best time to get involved in one of these programs is now, because you constantly have politicians on one side of the aisle or the other, even in very small Caribbean countries, saying, this isn't good enough, we're going to redo it, or we're going to get rid of it, or we're going to raise the price, or we're going to make the requirements more difficult. I think that these programs, I don't see, for many of them, substantial changes. I think there'll always be something available, but could it become more difficult? Could it become more burdensome in the future years as more of these restrictions are imposed, as Foreign Policy and The Guardian and others try and use breathless language to influence you against these programs? Yeah, quite possibly. So I would get in now. So long as you are not a criminal or don't become a criminal, you're going to keep your citizenship and you can be grandfathered in no matter what happens in the future. And so for me, the mere talk, the fact that this is what is driving the public conversation, this is the media, this is the politicians, these are the bureaucrats talking, is all the more reason why you want to have an option. Because the fact that they don't want you to have the options is why you need them. So people ask, Andrew, how do I get the most out of Nomad Capitalist? How do I begin my Nomad Capitalist journey? The first thing people do is they start right where you're at. They watch YouTube, they listen to podcasts, they read articles at nomadcapitalist.com. We've spent years creating thousands of pieces of free content so that you can get the vibe from someone who's actually done this, from someone who's actually been in your shoes. What they'll do next, they'll get a copy of the book. You can find it on Amazon. It costs a few bucks, and while it's not going to give you all the secrets, it's going to, again, give you more of the vibe. You're going to learn a lot of the things that I've learned. You're going to learn some strategies you can employ, and you're going to get a lot further in your journey. From there, if you are the 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur investor, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com. You can click Become a Client. We're pretty busy these days, but we have availability to help a limited number of people who want to create a holistic plan, something that I think is so important. So if you want to do that, go to nomadcapitalist.com, click Become a Client, learn more about how it works and how we can help you.